All right, let's dive in. Today, we are cracking the code on what is, let's be honest, one of the toughest parts of learning a new language, actually understanding native speakers when they're talking at full natural speed.
You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You've put in the hours, you've learned the grammar, you know a ton of vocabulary, but then you turn on a movie or overhear a conversation and it all just washes over you in this big blurry wave of sound. It is so frustrating, and it can really make you feel like you're getting nowhere.
But I've got some really good news for you. First off, it's not you. This is a wall that pretty much every single language learner hits. And the even better news, there is a clear, structured way to punch right through that wall. And that is exactly what we are going to break down today.
So here's the game plan. We're going to start by talking about why this native speed wall even exists. Then I'm going to walk you through this really powerful 3-step method. We'll cover step 1, which is all about building a safety net, then move on to step 2, the real test, and finish with step 3, the breakdown. And by the end, you'll see exactly how to go from just hearing sounds to actually understanding what's being said.
So, what is this big secret? Is it some kind of magic trick? Not at all. Think of it more like a workout for your ears. It's a proven, systematic technique designed to train your brain and close that gap between the slow, careful language you hear in a textbook and the fast, messy way people actually talk in real life.
The whole method really just boils down to these 3 simple phases. First, you watch something with the subtitles on. Easy enough. Second, you watch that same thing again, but with the subtitles off. And third, you go back and analyze. You deconstruct the specific parts that you still couldn't catch. It sounds simple, I know, but trust me, it's incredibly powerful.
Let's start with step 1, which we call the safety net. All you have to do here is watch or listen to something with the subtitles on, in the language you're learning, of course. And I know what you might be thinking. Isn't that cheating? Absolutely not. This is about building a crucial foundation. This process has a name. It's called scaffolding. What you're doing is literally building a bridge inside your brain. You're connecting those fast, new, unfamiliar sounds that you're hearing to the familiar, written words that you're reading. You're essentially creating a mental map, linking sound to text. And this brings us to the key difference between our first 2 steps. When you've got the subtitles on, that's the column on the left, your goal is just mapping sounds. It's more of a passive recognition. But the moment you turn them off, everything changes. Your goal becomes testing your recall, and your brain is forced to switch from just recognizing to actively listening. It's a way deeper level of processing. And that brings us to step 2, the real test. You've built your foundation, you've created that mental map. Now it's time to take off the training wheels. You're going to watch the exact same clip again, but this time, no subtitles. See, now your brain can't lean on the text anymore. It is forced to rely only on the audio. This is the real workout. And hey, maybe you only catch 50 or 60% this time. That is perfectly okay. That's actually great. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is to push your brain to do the heavy lifting on its own. Which leads us perfectly into our final and maybe most important step, the breakdown. This is where you get to be a detective. You rewind, you go back to those specific moments, those phrases that just sounded like a blur, and you figure out why. Why was that so confusing? Let's take a classic example from French. In a textbook, you learn to say this phrase just like it's written there, right? Je ne sais pas ce qui se passe. Every word is clear, distinct, but that is almost never what you're going to hear in a real conversation. In reality, what you'll probably hear sounds a lot more like je sais pas ce qui se passe. So what's going on here? Well, it's all about efficiency. Our mouths are lazy. We take shortcuts. As you can see, entire words get smashed together, sounds get linked up, and little unstressed vowels, poof, they just disappear. This isn't sloppy speaking. This is just how fluent, natural communication actually works. And this is the code that you are now learning to crack. So when you put all 3 steps together, what you have is a complete, repeatable workflow. It's a system that can take you all the way from confused hearing to confident understanding. And this isn't just a one-time trick. It's a method you can use for any song, any movie clip, any podcast, anything you want to master. So let's just recap the whole thing right here. Step 1, the safety net. You watch with subtitles to map the sounds to the words. Step 2, the real test. You watch without subtitles to test your pure, raw comprehension. And finally, step 3, the breakdown. You go back, you analyze the hard parts, and you deconstruct them so you can really learn. See how each step just logically builds on the one before it? So you see, the question isn't if you can understand fast native speakers anymore. The question is, how are you going to start? you have the method right here. So what's it going to be? A scene from your favorite movie? That song you've been trying to figure out? The only thing left to do is press play. All right, let's dive into one of the most beautiful and, yeah, sometimes one of the most intimidating parts of the French language. We are talking about literary French. Have you ever had that moment? You pick up a classic French novel, you're all excited to read it in the original language, and then you feel like you've hit a wall. The words are French, but the sentences just look different. Well, let me tell you, you are definitely not alone. That feeling is totally normal. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain and decode this formal, elegant style. We're going to turn that confusion into a real appreciation. So, here's our roadmap. First up, we'll pin down what literary French actually is. Then, we're going to zero in on its most famous feature, the passé simple. After that, we'll touch on a few other cool stylistic tricks, and we'll wrap up by talking about why any of this still matters today. Okay, so let's get right to it. What in the world is literary French? Well, the simplest way to put it is, it's the language of books. The official definition calls it a formal, written style you find in literature and historical texts. But the most important part, the real key, is that last phrase. It is distinct from everyday spoken French. I mean, nobody, and I mean nobody, orders a croissant using literary French. It exists for art. A really good way to wrap your head around this is to think about Shakespeare. You wouldn't walk up to a friend and say, "Hark, what news," right? It's English, but it's a different register. It's the same exact idea in French, one style for chatting, another for creating timeless literature. And this example just makes it crystal clear. Look at this. In spoken French, you'd say, "J'ai vu," I saw. Simple. But in literary French, it becomes "je vis." And notice how the casual "on a parlé" gets elevated to "nous parlâmes." The meaning is identical, but the vibe, the formality, is on a whole different level. And that brings us right to the main event. The star of the show, the famous and, let's be honest, often feared passé simple. This tense is the beating heart of storytelling in French. So what does it do? It's a past tense, but is a very specific tool for writers. It's used to narrate events that are done and dusted. Think of it as the engine of the plot. It says, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. It just moves the story forward with this clean, crisp authority. Okay, deep breath. I know a verb chart can look a little intense, but here's the secret. The goal is not to memorize this table. The goal is to learn to recognize the patterns. Once you start spotting those endings like a, it's, or aren't, a light bulb goes on. You'll immediately know, I'm in a story. This is literary French. It's like a secret code, and these are the clues. And here it is, out in the wild, a classic example. Il vit, he saw, and cette lumière fut, this light was. It just sounds so final, so literary, doesn't it? It has this epic quality, like a story being told from on high. That is exactly the effect that great authors are going for. But of course, literary French isn't just about the passé simple. Oh no, it has a whole bag of tricks, a whole toolbox of elegant devices that give it that unique flavor. So you'll also run into stuff like inversion, where they flip the verb and the subject around, like ainsi parlait-il. It just adds this dramatic flair. Then there's the infamous imperfect subjunctive, which is a whole other explainer for another day. And of course, authors will use a much richer, more sophisticated vocabulary. All these things work together to build that special atmosphere. So after all that, you might be wondering, okay, but if nobody actually talks this way, why should I care? And that is the absolute best question, because this is the most important part. Understanding this is your key to a much, much richer world. Look, the point here isn't to learn how to speak like you're in a 19th century novel. The point is about getting access. It's about unlocking this incredible treasure chest of art, history, and philosophy, and being able to experience it just as the author wrote it. So what can you do with this knowledge? For one, you can pick up books by the greats, Hugo, Camus, Proust, and read them without needing a translation. You can start to see why they chose a specific word or a specific tense. It's like seeing the brushstrokes on a painting. And in the end, you'll just have a much deeper, more complete feel for the entire French language. So the next time you open a French novel and you see one of those funny-looking verbs, don't see it as a barrier. See it as an invitation. It's a sign that you're about to step into a world that was carefully, beautifully crafted. The only question is, are you ready to step inside? Have you ever felt that your French is, grammatically correct, but it's just missing something? That it doesn't sound quite right? Well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to crack the nuance code. We're talking about those tiny, subtle word choices that can take your speaking from just good to genuinely, naturally French.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Imagine this. A friend in Paris invites you over for dinner. You want to be a great guest, right? So you offer to bring a bottle of wine. Super simple, super common situation, but how do you actually say that in French? So you're faced with two options here. They both basically look like they mean, I'm bringing the wine. I mean, they're almost identical. But get this, only one of them is right. So which one is it? This right here, this is the exact kind of puzzle that separates the learners from the truly fluent speakers.
And that's really the thing about French, isn't it? It's a language of incredible precision. Nailing these little details isn't just about trying to avoid mistakes. No, it's about showing that you have a much deeper feel for the language's internal logic and its natural flow. I want you to think of it this way. This is not just another grammar lesson, I promise. Mastering these little nuances, it's like learning a secret handshake. It's this subtle signal to native speakers that you're not just, translating words in your head. It shows you're really present and part of the conversation.
Okay, let's dive right in with our first case study. French has two super common words that both mean to know, savoir and connaître. They might seem pretty similar, but trust me, they are absolutely not interchangeable.
All right, first up is savoir. This one is all about knowing facts, data, or skills. You use savoir when you're talking about information you can learn or a skill you've mastered. Think of it as knowing that something is true or knowing how to do something, like how to swim or how to speak a language. It's head knowledge. And then, on the other hand, we have connaître. This one is all about familiarity, about being acquainted with something. You use connaître for people, places, or things that you've experienced directly. See, you don't know a person like a fact, you're acquainted with them. You don't know a city like it's a piece of data, you're familiar with it. And here is where that distinction becomes crystal clear. You would say, je sais où il habite, because his address, that's a piece of factual information. It's a bit of data. You know the fact of where he lives. Now, on the flip side, you'd say, je connais Paris. Why? Because you're familiar with the city through your own experience. Maybe you've been there, you've walked its streets. You can't know Paris like it's a phone number. Here's a great way to remember it. Savoir is for the mind, but connaître is for the senses. Okay, ready for the next one? Let's see how this concept of nuance builds. This next pair is all about how French speakers see and talk about time, using the words an and année. And yep, they both translate to year. So an is used like a mathematical unit, a single point on a calendar. You use it for counting someone's age, 20 ans, or for specifying a particular year, like l'an 2026. But année, that's about the duration, the whole experience within that year. It describes the span of time itself, like a difficult year, une année difficile, or the whole year, toute l'année. So here's the really simple distinction. Just think of an as a marker on a timeline. But année is the actual story that happens between two of those markers. One is just a number, the other is a narrative. Pretty cool, right? All right, it's time to solve our dinner party problem. This brings us to our final pair for today, the two different verbs for to bring, amener and apporter. First, we've got amener. The secret clue is right there in the word itself. See that mener part? It means to lead. So you use amener when you are bringing something that can move all on its own, a person, a child, an animal. You are literally leading them to a place. And then there's apporter. And again, the root tells you everything you need to know. Porter, which means to carry. So this one is for all the inanimate objects, the things you have to physically carry with you. A book, a cake, a gift, or, you guessed it, a bottle of wine. So let's just look at these examples. It's so logical once you see it. You amène your friend or your dog because you lead them there, but you apporte the wine or gift because you carry it. It's this beautiful, simple logic hidden right inside the language. And there it is, the answer to our opening puzzle.
You would tell your host, j'apporte le vin, because you carry the wine. But if you were also bringing a +1, you would say, j'emmène mon ami. See? Simple.
So you might be wondering, why do these seemingly tiny choices matter so much? I mean, people will probably still understand you, right? Well, yeah, but using them correctly signals a huge shift in how you're approaching the language.
Because this is really the key takeaway from all of this. It's the difference between just speaking French and actually thinking in French. You're no longer just swapping words from your native language. You're starting to use the concepts and the logic that's baked right into French itself. And the best part is, you can totally do this for any pair of confusing words you come across. First, just start to actively listen for patterns. Notice how native speakers use them. Then, try to figure out the core rule, like facts versus familiarity or leading versus carrying. And finally, practice with purpose. Make up your own sentences to really make that concept stick. So here's your mission, should you choose to accept it. Become a nuanced detective. Every French movie you watch, every song you listen to, every conversation you have, it's a brand new chance to spot these subtleties. Don't just hear the words. Investigate why that specific word was chosen over another. And that really leaves us with a bigger, more fascinating question. Learning these little distinctions doesn't just make you a better French speaker, it gives you this tiny window into a completely different way of organizing and seeing the world. So it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does the language you speak reveal about how you see everything?
You ever try to explain something just massive? I mean, something so complex, like an entire country, where you just don't even know where to begin? Well, today, we're going to tackle that exact problem. We're going to build a framework that you can use to understand, well, pretty much anything.
Now, seriously, think about it for a second. The history, the people, the food, the politics, I mean, all of it. Where would you even start? It feels impossible, right? But what if I told you there's a really powerful framework hidden inside just a single sentence?
So that's our mission today. We're going to take a simple request, a creative prompt, and we're just going to tear it apart, deconstruct it, and by the end of all this, you're going to have a repeatable system, not just for understanding a country, but for breaking down any complex topic you want to get your head around.
All right, let's get into it. Here's the roadmap for today. We'll start with what I'm calling the impossible prompt. Then we'll break down the 3 big pillars it gives us: culture, politics, and society. And finally, we'll wrap up with what I call the creator's toolkit.
Okay, so this is where it all begins. It all starts right here. This is the source material for our entire explainer. Just one single, kind of challenging request that, believe it or not, has the seeds of a brilliant framework hiding inside. That's it. That's the whole prompt. Create a documentary-style video exploring French culture, politics, and society. I mean, right away, it just hands us the 3 fundamental pillars we need to build our whole understanding. It's the entire foundation, right there in one sentence.
All right, let's start building this thing out. Pillar number 1, culture. I like to think of this as the soul of a place, you know? It's the flavor, the unique personality that makes it, well, it.
So what are we really talking about when we say culture? Well, you can think of it as the collective expression of a group of people. It's the stuff they create, the things they believe in, what they pass down from one generation to the next. It's all that shared stuff that makes a group, well, that group.
And here's the really cool part. None of these things exist in a vacuum. They're all connected. A country's language shapes its literature, right? Its values totally influence its art and its music. And its traditions, they define the food. To really get the culture, you have to see how all these pieces of the puzzle fit together to tell one big, coherent story.
Okay, so if culture is the heartbeat, then our second pillar, politics, is kind of like the brain. This is the system, the whole structure of power that governs how everything else works. It's basically how all the big decisions get made.
When you boil it all down, politics is really about 2 things: governance and power. It's that constant push and pull, that debate over who gets to make the rules and how the country should actually be run.
And here's the thing. To really get a country's politics, you can't just look at who's in charge right now. That's just scratching the surface. You've got to understand the system itself, the whole government structure. You need to know about the big historical movements that shaped it, the core ideas that people believe in, and of course, how that nation deals with the rest of the world.
And that brings us to our final pillar, society. So if culture is the personality and politics is the brain, then society is the body. It's the living, breathing structure of how people actually organize themselves and interact with each other day in and day out.
You know, the 2 big phrases to focus on here are ordered community and structures.
Society is all about the systems. Things like the education system, family structures, social classes, all the things that shape our everyday lives and how we interact.
You know, a lot of people kind of mix up culture and society, but this really helps make it clear. They're actually pretty different. Think of it this way. Culture is the what of a nation. It's the personality. Society is the how. It's the anatomy, the skeleton. And you absolutely need both to see the whole picture.
Okay, so having these three pillars, culture, politics, and society, that's a fantastic start. But knowing what to look for is really only half the battle. To get a truly deep understanding, you also need to know how to look, and that's where the Creator's Toolkit comes in.
And this toolkit is actually super simple. It's just 3 steps. First, you add some expert commentary. That brings in authority and a bunch of different viewpoints. Second, you define the key vocabulary, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. And third, you pose discussion questions. That turns it from just passively listening into actively thinking. It's a perfect recipe for real engagement.
And this is the real magic of it, right? These aren't just tips for making a video. They're practical tools for learning. For anyone who wants to learn or teach a complex subject better. Bring in other voices, define your terms, and ask good questions. It's that simple.
So let's put it all together. Here it is, the complete framework all born from that one little prompt. You've got your pillars, those are your course subjects. You've got your toolkit, those are your methods for making it all engaging. And what's the goal? A deep, comprehensive understanding.
So if there's one thing you take away today, I want it to be this. This framework, Pillars plus Toolkit, it's yours now. Think of it like a new lens you can use to deconstruct any complex topic. You want to understand a company, a new scientific theory, some big historical event? Start with the pillars, then use the toolkit to dig in deeper.
So really, that just leaves us with one final question for you. Now that you have this framework, now that you have this powerful new way of looking at and breaking down the world, what complex topic are you going to try to explain next?
Hey there, have you ever had that feeling with French, where you know all the grammar, you've got the vocabulary down, but when you actually speak, something's just off? It sounds less like you're chatting in a Parisian cafe and more like you're reading aloud from a textbook. Well, today, we're going to figure out exactly why that happens and how to fix it by tapping into the real music of the language.
You know, this is a huge frustration for so many people learning French. It's not about getting every single word perfect. It's about that bigger picture, that overall sound that can feel like it's just out of reach.
Does this hit home for you? You put together a grammatically perfect sentence, you pronounce every word as clearly as you can, but a native speaker, they still know instantly that you're not from around there. So why is that? It's because the secret isn't just in the words themselves, it's in the music that connects them all. And here's a massive clue as to why this is such a common problem. A survey found that a staggering 39% of French teachers in English universities, well, they never do exercises that integrate intonation. They're so focused on teaching the individual notes, they're completely missing the melody.
And this right here just reveals the huge disconnect. Take a look. 80% of teachers are laser-focused on correcting individual pronunciation mistakes, but less than half are consciously listening for the overall intonation, the melody. It's no wonder that the real music of French just gets lost in the classroom.
So, what is this music I keep talking about? Well, we can break it down into 2 really fundamental parts: intonation and rhythm. If you can master these 2 things, you are well on your way to unlocking a much more natural, authentic French sound. Okay, first up is intonation. The easiest way to think about this is just the melody of your speech. And in French, it is incredibly powerful. The very same set of words can mean completely different things, all depending on the pitch of your voice. So, take this super simple phrase, tu viens. If your voice falls at the end, it's a statement, you are coming. But if your voice rises at the end, those exact same words suddenly become a question, are you coming? The entire meaning changes just from the melody of your voice. It's that important.
All right, now let's talk about rhythm. And this one is a game changer. In English, we have what's called a stress-timed rhythm. We punch certain syllables harder than others, right? Like, I went to the store to buy some bread. French is a completely different ballgame.
So, here's the crucial thing you need to get. French is syllable timed. What that means is that each little phrase, or rhythmic group, gets about the same amount of time, the same beat. So as you add more syllables, you actually have to say them faster to fit them into that same rhythmic slot. Let me show you what I mean.
Okay,
Imagine each phrase here has to fit into one single beat. A simple, two-syllable word is easy. Salut!
Now we add a syllable, so we have to speed up just a little bit to fit it into that same beat, si tu veux.
And with 4 syllables, you've got to speed up even more. Comment ça va? Can you hear that flow? Salut, si tu veux, comment ça va? You're not punching any single word, you're just adjusting your speed to fit the rhythm. That, right there, is the secret to that famous flowing sound of French.
Okay, the final piece of this puzzle is all about how French speakers make their speech sound so incredibly smooth and connected, almost like it's all one long word. And this is where something called liaison comes into play.
So liaison is basically the art of taking a silent consonant at the end of a word and bringing it back to life, but only when the very next word starts with a vowel. It's the glue that bridges the gap between words, getting rid of those choppy pauses, and creating that signature fluid sound.
But, and this is a big but, here's the trick. You can't just connect every single word. There are actually 3 types of liaison. The ones you have to do, the ones you can never do, and the ones that are, well, optional. Knowing the difference is absolutely critical to sounding natural.
Here is a classic example of a mandatory liaison. The S at the end of lay is normally totally silent, but because ami starts with a vowel, that S activates and makes a Z sound, linking the 2 words perfectly. Les amis. If you don't do this, it's a dead giveaway.
And on the flip side, you have forbidden liaisons. The word which just means and, is a great example. Even though it ends in a T, and the next word might start with a vowel, you never pronounce that T. Saying it alors is a classic mistake. And then, of course, there's the gray area, optional liaisons. With a phrase like pas encore, you might hear that S liaison in a super formal speech, or maybe on the news. But in a casual chat with friends, almost never. Using it just signals that you're speaking in a more careful, formal way.
So we've got intonation, rhythm, and liaison. How in the world are you supposed to practice all of this at the same time? Well, there is one incredibly powerful technique that brings it all together.
It's called shadowing. Now, this isn't about listening and then repeating. It's about speaking with them at the exact same time. You are literally trying to become their vocal shadow, mimicking not just their words, but the entire musical performance of how they speak.
Here's how you do it. It's super simple. First, find a short audio clip, a podcast, a news report, whatever. Next, listen to it one time just to get the general idea. Then, play it again and start speaking along with the narrator right away, trying to match their speed and melody exactly. And finally, and this part is key, record yourself and then compare it to the original. That's where the magic happens, because you'll immediately hear the subtle little differences in your own rhythm and your own intonation.
All right, so let's tie this all together. Getting that natural French sound really isn't about memorizing more words or cramming more grammar rules. It's about a really fundamental shift in how you even approach the language. And this, right here, is the core takeaway. It's all about training your ear to hear the music that native speakers just take for granted. You have to stop processing French as just a series of words written on a page and start hearing it as a flow of rhythmic, melodic sound. So I'm going to leave you with this question. The next time you listen to some French, I want you to try to tune out the individual words for just a moment and focus only on the rhythm, the changes in pitch, and the connections between sounds. What new patterns, what hidden melodies are you going to discover?
Okay, let's start with a really big question. How do you actually build a nation's future? The answer we're going to look at today, well, it's not what you'd expect. It isn't about economics or politics. It's found inside a document from a classroom in West Africa. I mean, it's a huge question, right? You could point to infrastructure, the economy, foreign policy, all valid answers. But for this explainer, we're going to zoom in on one country's very specific and, I think, pretty brilliant strategy. You heard that right. This is the story of how a teacher's guide, a simple document, is at the heart of a national plan to totally rewrite the future for millions of kids. It's a revolution, but one that starts quietly, in the classroom. To really get this, we have to start where every teacher there starts, with the official lesson plan. It's called the fiche pédagogique, and it is the fundamental tool for every single class, every single day. And when I say detailed, I mean detailed. This is not your average to-do list.
Just look at it. It's this highly engineered blueprint for every hour of teaching. It maps out everything, from what the students will be doing to the teacher's exact role.
So that's the real question, isn't it? Why go to all this trouble? To answer that, we need to zoom out, way out from this one document, and look at the national vision that kicked this whole thing off back in 2013. You see, that super detailed lesson plan isn't just about micromanaging teachers. It's the end result of a massive shift in educational philosophy. We're talking about a complete rethinking of what it even means to learn.
The entire reform is built around this one big idea, the Integrated Pedagogical Approach, or API for short. Think of it as a whole new operating system designed to make education work better by changing how teaching itself is done.
And at the very core of API is this really powerful theory called socio-constructivism. The main idea is simple but profound. People don't just absorb knowledge like a sponge. They have to build it. They construct it themselves by talking, by doing, and by working together. And that one idea creates this fundamental shift in the classroom. You go from the old way, the teacher's standing at the front just lecturing, to the new API way, where the teacher's job is to be a guide, a facilitator, who helps students discover and build that knowledge for themselves. So the API runs on a few key principles. It's not just about what the kids learn, but how. It's about putting the student at the center of everything, making sure it's fair for all kids, and, this is crucial, connecting what they learn in school directly to their actual everyday lives.
Okay, so that's the big picture philosophy, but how does all that high-level thinking actually change what a teacher does, on a Tuesday morning in the classroom?
This table shows you the before and after perfectly. On the right, that's the traditional way. Recall the lesson, study the topic. Pretty passive. But on the left, you see the new API phases. It's a much more dynamic flow of presenting, developing, and evaluating. And it's all focused on what the students themselves can analyze and produce. And suddenly, that complex lesson plan we saw at the beginning makes total sense. It's built to bring this new philosophy to life. Step 1, you present the topic to get them hooked. Step 2, you develop their understanding by giving them a real problem to chew on. And finally, you evaluate, not just what they can remember, but what they can actually do with that new knowledge. And that focus on what students can do, well, it doesn't just stop with teaching. It totally transforms how they're tested. And honestly, this might be one of the most revolutionary parts of the entire system. This is a game changer. The guide says, point blank, that the purpose of a test is not to filter students out. It's to help them. It's about figuring out where they got lost and helping them get back on track. That's what they mean by orientation and remediation. And to make sure that evaluation is actually fair, teachers are trained in this 3-step method. So instead of just slapping a grade on a paper, they first define what success looks like. Then they find concrete things to look for, and finally, they build a totally transparent grading grid that's often shared with the students. Everyone knows the rules of the game. All right, let's pull the lens back one last time. We've gone from a single, detailed page in a lesson plan all the way to the philosophy behind it. Now let's connect all these classroom details back to that huge national ambition we started with. So why do all this? For this. These are the ultimate goals listed in the guide. Every single student-centered lesson, every fair test, it's all designed to build these skills, to create citizens who are critical thinkers, who understand their world, and who are ready to contribute to it. I mean, this quote from the Minister of Education in the guide's preface, it just says it all, doesn't it? He's not talking about school. He's framing education as the literal operating system, the software that's going to program the entire country's future. And here it is, from the minute-by-minute structure of a French class all the way up to the software of society, this guide is a complete top-to-bottom blueprint for change. It's an incredible example of systematic, long-term thinking. And that leaves us with one last thought. Diving this deep into Burkina Faso's educational plan really makes you wonder, right? Every education system out there is running on some kind of software, some set of unspoken rules and goals. And the real question is, do we even know what ours is?
Okay, let's be honest. We've all been there, right? You're staring at some super complex piece of literature, and the only instruction you have is analyze it. It's a feeling that can go from, well, confusion to straight-up panic pretty fast. But what if you could actually turn that panic into pure, persuasive confidence?
Let's break down exactly how to do that. You know the exact feeling I'm talking about. There's a blank page in front of you, a really dense poem or a tricky passage, and your mind just goes blank. It's such a common anxiety. But what if I told you there was a system, a way to crack any text wide open?
The French actually have a name for this whole exercise, le commentaire composé, and this definition is everything. See, it's not about finding some single right answer. It's a personal, argued study. Your job is to explore what makes the text tick, what were the author's intentions, what effect does it have on us, and what makes it so unique.
So the very first step is really just a mental shift. We need to completely reframe how we even approach the text. You have to understand that analysis isn't passive, it's an active investigation. You're not just reading for the plot, you're reading for clues. Think of it like this. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to answer 4 key questions. First, what is the author actually saying? What's the core message? Then, how are they saying it? What literary techniques are they using? Third, why did they choose to say it that way? And maybe the most important one, what effect does it all have on you, the reader? How does it make you feel? This right here becomes your roadmap for literally any text.
And this is the exact mindset you need to get into. From now on, you are a literary detective. The text, that's your crime scene. The author's choices, every word, every comma, that's your evidence. Your essay, that's you building your case. Your whole goal is to solve the mystery of how this text works its magic.
Of course, every good detective needs a toolkit. So let's go ahead and open ours up and take a look at the practical tools you're going to use to gather all those crucial clues from the text. Think of these as your different magnifying glasses or lenses. You can look at the lexical level, that's just fancy for word choice. Then you've got the syntactic, how are the sentences actually built? Are they long and flowing or short and punchy? Then there's the rhetorical, metaphors, similes, all those figures of speech. And finally, the rhythmic, how does the text sound? Each one of these lenses reveals a totally different layer of evidence.
Now, for your secret weapon. This is a simple, super memorable acronym that's going to become the heart of your whole process. And make sure you're always analyzing and not just describing what's happening. It's called the CIA method. Let me show you how it works.
We're going to use this incredibly powerful opening line from Chateaubriand. I mean, wow. I was almost dead when I came into the world. It's dramatic, it's a paradox, it's just packed with meaning. Absolutely perfect for our little CIA investigation.
Here's the breakdown. First, you cite the evidence. You just quote the text, I was almost dead when I came into the world. Simple. Second, you identify the literary technique. So what's going on here? Well, it's an antithesis. You have this stark opposition of dead and came into the world. And finally, you analyze. So what? What's the effect of that? It creates this tragic, heavy atmosphere from the very first sentence. It frames the narrator's entire life as a struggle. See? Cite, identify, analyze. It takes a simple observation and turns it into a killer analytical point.
Okay, so you've used your CIA method all over the text. Your notebook is just full of clues. Now what do? I mean, you can't just throw a jumble of evidence at your reader. You have to organize it into a solid, coherent argument. You need a blueprint.
And this is the step that separates a pile of random notes from a genuinely persuasive essay. The goal is to group your best clues, your strongest CIA findings, into a logical structure that tells a story about the text.
And yeah, I get it. Choosing that plan can feel a little puzzling at first. There isn't just one magic formula that works for everything. But don't worry, the key is just to look at all your evidence and see what patterns start to emerge. What are the big ideas that keep popping up again and again?
So here are 3 of the most common blueprints. You could go thematic, where each paragraph tackles a different major theme. You could follow the structure of the text itself, analyzing it from beginning to middle to end. Or you could build an analytical plan, where each section focuses on one major literary device the author keeps using. There's no single right answer. The best plan is always the one that best shows off your discoveries.
All right, detective, you've got your evidence. You've got your blueprint. Now it's time for the final act, writing the essay and presenting your case to the jury, which is, your reader.
A strong case needs a powerful opening statement, right? Think of your introduction as having 4 essential ingredients. You start with a hook to grab the reader's attention. Then you introduce the text and the author. After that, you state what makes this text so interesting in the first place. And finally, you announce your plan, giving the reader a clear roadmap of where your argument is going.
Every single one of your body paragraphs is like a mini argument on its own. You start with your main idea for that paragraph,
Then you build the argument explaining it, but you can't just say it. You have to prove it with a citation from the text. And here's the most important part. Don't just drop the quote and run. You have to analyze it. You have to explain how that evidence actually proves your point. See how this structure brings your CIA method to life in every paragraph?
Now, for a more advanced tip, there are really two ways to make your case. You can convince, which appeals to pure reason, logic, facts, evidence. But the most powerful analysis also aims to persuade, which appeals to emotion. It's about using your writing style to make the reader not just intellectually agree with you, but to actually feel the importance of your point. The best arguments, they do both.
And finally, the conclusion. This is your closing argument, your mic drop moment. It's just two simple parts. First, the synthesis, a brief, powerful summary of your main points. Do not introduce new evidence here. And second, the opening. Connect the text to something bigger, another book, a historical movement, a universal human theme. That's what leaves your reader with a lasting impression.
So, here's the most important takeaway from all of this. Mastering literary analysis isn't just about passing a class or getting a good grade. It's about learning the fundamental life skill of how to build a clear, evidence-based, and persuasive argument about anything.
So there you have it. That's the whole process. You've got the mindset of a detective, the tools for investigation, and the blueprint for building a compelling case. You now have everything you need to move from that initial moment of panic to a place of real, confident persuasion.
So I'll just leave you with this one question. The next time you read a book, or watch a movie, or even listen to a political speech, what will you see differently? Now that you have the tools of the literary detective, what hidden messages are you going to uncover?
Okay, let's talk about something that can feel, super intimidating: French academic writing. Whether you're working on an essay, a critique, or even a dissertation, there's this very specific logic, this structure that's expected. And today, we are going to crack that code and demystify the whole thing for you.
We've all been there, right? That dreaded blinking cursor on a blank page feels like a spotlight. And let's be honest, the reputation of French formal writing is a lot. It's seen as this incredibly rigorous, demanding thing, governed by all these unwritten rules. It can cause a ton of anxiety, but it really doesn't have to.
So here's the key. You got to shift your mindset. Stop thinking of it as a bunch of rigid rules you have to follow, and start seeing it for what it is: an architect's blueprint. Seriously. It's this powerful, logical system designed to help you build a really sophisticated, nuanced argument. And once you get the blueprint, you can build just about anything.
Okay, so let's start with the absolute foundation. This is the single most important piece of any formal French paper, and it's called the problématique.
Now, here's the thing. A problématique isn't just your topic. For instance, if your topic is freedom in the 19th century novel, that's just a topic. Your problématique might be something like, to what extent does the pursuit of individual freedom inevitably lead to social alienation in 19th century literature? See the difference? It's a specific, debatable question that frames the entire intellectual journey you're about to take.
So how do you actually find one? Well, it's pretty much a three-step process. First, you just deconstruct the prompt. What are the keywords? What are the hidden assumptions? Then, you hunt for the tension. Where's the conflict or the paradox hiding in there? And finally, you turn that tension into a sharp, open-ended question. A strong problématique is like your compass. It makes sure every single thing you write is focused and has a purpose.
All right, so you've got your central question. Now you need the framework to answer it. And in French writing, this is the classic plan. It's the blueprint that's going to house your entire argument.
And this is where we see a really crucial difference. A lot of us are taught to build a simple, linear argument, Point A leads to point B, and boom, conclusion. But the French model is often dialectical. It's more of a conversation. You present your main idea, that's the thèse. Then you actually challenge it with a counter-argument or complexity, the antithèse. The goal isn't just to prove you're right, but to resolve this tension with a much more sophisticated, nuanced idea, the synthèse.
And this is the full blueprint. Your introduction's job is to hook the reader and clearly state your problématique and your plan. The development section is where the magic happens. You build your case, you challenge it, and then you synthesize it all into a higher-level insight. And the conclusion? The conclusion is a total power move. It doesn't just rehash what you've already said. No, it gives a decisive answer to your problématique, and then, ideally, it opens the door to an even bigger question, showing why your whole analysis really matters.
So, you've got your question, you've got your structure, but how should it all sound? The tone of your writing is absolutely critical for establishing your credibility and authority. It's really the final piece of the puzzle.
The whole goal here is objectivity and logical precision. That's why you want to avoid personal stuff like "I think." It keeps the focus on the argument itself, not on you. You swap out emotional words like "amazing" for more analytical ones. And this is so important. You use what are called logical connectors. These are not just fancy transition words. They're precision tools that show the exact logical relationship between your ideas, cause and effect, contrast, all of it. They literally build the scaffolding for your argument.
Just look at this example. Using par conséquent, which means therefore or consequently, does so much more than just connect two ideas. It establishes a direct cause and effect relationship. It tells the reader, hey, because of this first thing, this second thing is the logical result. It builds this unbreakable chain of reasoning that's so much stronger than just saying and.
So, you see, the whole point of this system, the problématique, the dialectical plan, the formal tone, it's not meant to restrict you. Far from it. It's a toolkit that's designed to empower you to build the clearest, most compelling argument you possibly can.
So let's just recap the 3 keys you now have in your pocket. 1, find your question, your problématique, to give your work a clear, unwavering direction. 2, build your blueprint using that incredible tes, antecedents, synthèse structure to get that depth and nuance. And 3, master your voice with a formal logical tone so you can present your ideas with real authority. These aren't just rules, they're the building blocks of powerful thinking.
And so we end right back where we started, but now with a totally different perspective. That blank page, it's not an intimidating void anymore. It's a construction site. You have the blueprint, you've got the tools, and you have the keys to the code. So the only question left is, what are you going to build first?
So if you're learning a language, you know that big, kind of scary goal, right? Sounding like a native. It feels like the ultimate sign of fluency. But what if that whole idea is actually what's holding us back? Yeah, let's get into that.
I mean, we all chase this ideal of sounding native, but what does that actually mean? The path to get there feels so intimidating, and it's mostly because we're starting with a completely wrong definition of what success even looks like. Usually our picture of fluency is, well, it's kind of robotic, isn't it? We imagine perfect grammar, zero accent, speaking in these flawless sentences pulled straight out of a textbook. It's this standard of absolute perfection that, let's be real, is pretty much impossible for most of us.
But what if we just threw that idea out? What if we shifted our focus from being perfect to being authentic? It turns out there's a kind of blueprint for sounding natural, a sort of secret code that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time. And you're not going to believe this, but the entire blueprint, the whole secret, is packed inside one simple, powerful, creative prompt, a single clue that can completely reframe how we think about fluency. Okay, here it is, a prompt to create a video showing natural conversation. Now, look closer at those instructions. It doesn't ask for perfection, it specifically asks for fillers, pacing, and real dialogue. Think about that for a second. That's the complete opposite of the perfect textbook speech we're always told to aim for. So let's break down these 3 seemingly imperfect ingredients, because as it turns out, they are the 3 essential keys to unlocking speech that sounds truly natural and, well, native-like. These 3 elements are our steps to authentic speech. We're going to start by embracing the very things we're often taught to avoid, like filler words, before we move on to the actual rhythm of the conversation itself. First up, fillers. You know, in French, it's or ben. In English, it's or like. We're trained to see these as mistakes. But native speakers, they use them constantly. And why? Because that's the sound of a human brain actually processing information in real time. So using fillers doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're thinking. It's a genuine sign that you're engaged in the conversation, not just reciting lines you memorized. Next up, let's talk about pacing. You know, a real conversation isn't a race. It has a pulse, it speeds up, it slows down, and most importantly, it's full of pauses and hesitations. That right there is the real music of natural speech. And this gets at one of the biggest misconceptions about fluency. So many learners think they need to speak incredibly fast to sound native. But it's not about speed at all. It's about the cadence, the pauses for emphasis, the hesitation while you search for just the right word. That's what makes speech feel authentic. And our final key, real dialogue. This is the exact opposite of those clean, predictable conversations you find in language apps.
Real talk is spontaneous, it's messy. People interrupt each other, they change topics, they circle back. It's just beautifully imperfect. So you can really see the two different models here. On one side, you've got that old ideal, perfect, robotic speech right out of a textbook. On the other, you have the reality of human conversation, which is built on our three keys: fillers, pacing, and real dialogue. The goal isn't to be a machine, it's to be a person.
So what does all this really mean? Well, it means we need to completely redefine what we're aiming for. It's a huge shift away from the impossible goal of perfection and towards something much more meaningful: connection.
Let's be really clear here. The objective is not to sound like a perfect carbon copy of a native speaker, to completely erase your own unique voice or accent. Chasing that kind of perfection only leads to anxiety and frustration.
Instead, the true goal is to be understood, to express yourself, and to connect with another person in an authentic way. It's about embracing the natural flow of conversation, imperfections and all.
Because when it comes right down to it, fluency isn't about being perfect. It's about making a connection. The moment you are understood, and you can understand in return, that is true fluency. That's the real win. By focusing on fillers, pacing, and real dialogue, you're not just learning a language. You're learning how to be part of a real conversation. So the real question is, are you ready to stop chasing perfection and start embracing the beautiful, messy, and authentic reality of language?